Do you seek the freedom to pursue greater meaning and purpose in your life? Is there something that you're passionate about that you'd like to support by giving time, talent, or money? Do you seek a level of financial freedom to live an ideal life as you uniquely define it? Welcome to the Money and Meaning Show with Jeff Bernier, a show dedicated to helping you gain the confidence and freedom to lead a life of personal significance and help you get your actions and resources in alignment with what matters most.
Hello and welcome to the Money and Meaning Show. I am so pleased you decided to spend a few minutes with us today. My name is Jeff Bernier. I am your guide and host as we continue our conversations around money and meaning. And as you know, this show is really all about helping you and encouraging you to get some clarity around what matters. How do you create the clarity about what matters, what gives your life purpose and meaning? And then we combine that with wealth management, which is what I do in my day job. And so we try to combine how do we create the clarity, the confidence, and the financial freedom to go pursue our vision of a meaningful life, or your vision of a meaningful life. As you also know, some of these concepts I put in a book recently called The Money and Meaning Journey, a guide to clarity, financial confidence, and joy. And in that book, I use a lot of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey metaphor, in a lot of great literature and movies and television shows. There's a pattern that's called the hero's journey. And one of the really important aspects of most movies and literature that Joseph Campbell uncovered, and through myths, through time, this is not a new idea. One of the steps in the hero's journey is they find a guide. So I'm hoping that the book and this podcast and our guest today can help be your guide to helping you flesh out what gives you meaning and purpose. And again, as I have guests on and we talk about wealth management, how do we create the financial margin to go pursue it? So I'm really, really excited about our guest today. Joining us today is my friend Alan Hunt, Dr. Alan Hunt. So let me give him a proper introduction and I'll get him on here and we'll get rolling. But, Alan's been a busy guy since I last saw him. It's been a few years, but he is a 4-time #1 best-selling author. He collaborated with Matthew Kelly recently to write No Regrets, a fable about living your fourth quarter intentionally. I speak a lot about the second act. They're using the fourth quarter metaphor, and in Alan's book, he talks about things that we want to be paying attention to in the fourth quarter. And really, in No Regrets, Alan and Matthew share the powerful secrets of 5 keys to living and dying with no regrets. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And it led them actually to create another book called The Fourth Quarter of Life, Embracing What Matters Most. So you can understand why I'm so attracted to this material. But Alan's been really active in sharing these messages. He's become known as the fourth quarter guy. I will talk more about his background in a moment. But Alan, thanks for joining us on the Money and Meaning Show.
Jeff, it is great to see you, and it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks again for joining us. The audience is well aware of what attracted me to your messaging, because again, it really speaks to what I've been trying to write and talk about at a very surface level in some respects, as we try to help our clients get clear on what matters. So again, delighted to have you here. And as I always do, I'd love for you just to kind of give the audience a little bit about Alan and your family, and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Well, I grew up in a little town in the mountains called Brevard, North Carolina, and went to school at Mercer in Macon, Georgia, where I met my wife. And in a couple of weeks, we'll celebrate our 35th wedding anniversary.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
And so we now, like you, have grandkids. So we have 2 daughters who are both grown. One's in Columbus, Georgia. The other one's in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Her husband is a nuclear sub guy. So they're
Wow.
stationed out there. And so she has three kids, and then my daughter in Columbus has four. So we have 7 grandkids.
Wow.
And what I didn't tell you, Jeff, is that they're in perfect sequence: 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1 years old.
Oh,
So
my
it is
goodness.
a perfect staircase. So 4 boys and then 3 girls. We thought it was just going to be a whole testosterone fest, and then all of a sudden we made a quick shift and headed toward the estrogen. So we're having fun, and yeah, I've shifted really over the last couple of years to really focusing on this idea of the fourth quarter, as you mentioned. So I'm really, really glad to be with you, because you and I there's a lot of commonality between what we're trying to do and how we're trying to help people.
It sounds like it. And just educationally, you got your undergrad at Mercer, I think, and you got a PhD from Princeton at some point.
From Yale.
I'm sorry, from Yale. I'm sorry.
Yep, that's all right.
Would be really upset with me on that.
Princeton's a little prettier place, so there's real arguments for that. Yep.
They're all good. Yeah, so you've got an extensive background. Something else I really like about your bio is it's quite varied. I know. I think you know, after you got out of Mercer, you got into the corporate world, and then you made a lot of shifts and turns here and there. Do you mind kind of walking us through? I even hate to call it a career path. I had a guest on recently that I really call it a journey too. But can you walk us through a little bit about your various stages that you've been in career wise?
Yeah, I actually kind of starting out, really, I thought I kind of wanted to do somewhat similar to what you do, either wealth management or even maybe investment banking. So I was a finance major.
Yeah.
I love business. I got a great gig coming out of college, much better than I expected, to be honest. And had a great experience with a management consulting firm for several years.
Wow.
But really just had this deep sense in my life that I wasn't, even though I was good at it and enjoyed it, that I wasn't going to really, that's not what I was made for. That there was sort of a nagging sense of discontentment inside of me, or dissatisfaction in terms of what my life would look like. And so really, I had several different kind of spiritual experiences that we won't deviate toward today, but where I just really felt a calling from God on my life to leave my expectations for what I thought my life was going to be and my corporate existence, to move into full-time ordained ministry. So I did that. And Anita and I served as in the role of Methodist pastor for 20 years.
Right.
And then I shifted from there and moved into helping to create a syndicated radio show nationally that was on mainstream stations, not on Christian stations, on news talk stations, about faith and real life and faith.
Right.
And through that, really kind of began to move more toward writing and speaking and coaching. And it's funny because, as my colleague Matthew Kelly that you mentioned that I co-wrote these last 2 books with, we put out resources every year for churches and individuals, and decided to really pick up something around aging and dying, because nobody ever talks about that. And so we either deny it, and we keep saying, 60 is the new 30, 80 is the new 20, and that kind of stuff, or we try to defy it. So we either try to pretend that death doesn't exist, or we try to pretend that we can just kind of keep living the same kind of life. And as I hit my mid 50s and we started working on this project, I guess about 5-6 years ago with the research and stuff, I realized, this is a significantly different part of my life. It doesn't have to be better or worse. It's different. And so maybe God has something in store for this season of my life that's different than what's been before. And I ought to be open to exploring that rather than just trying to kind of extend out the third quarter of my life. Got
you. And so that was really my next question. What kind of got you interested in, how did you become known as the fourth quarter guy? But I guess it was part of it was your own personal journey, right? Trying to work through, what does God want me to do next? And, what am I being called to do in this particular season? But anything else to add to that? I mean, is that really what
no, we were, yeah, we were,
I mean, we did. You've gone really deep on the research and again, obviously writing a couple additional books in addition to the other books that you had focused really on this issue of aging and how do we make this fourth quarter meaningful? Yeah, I mean, that God, if the average American lives to be 80 years old, and some people get, bonus overtime period, but some people don't. I mean, I went to a funeral last week for a very dear friend who was 62 who died of cancer. So he just barely begun the fourth quarter. So
but some people get to get a whole extra period, which is great. But the average American lives to be about 80 years old. And so if you think about that, that means when you turn 60, you're 3/4 of the way there. Doing the math. And so, I mean, we can say all kinds of things, but that means, 3/4 of your life is behind you and a fourth is ahead. So that's where we kind of came up with this idea of the fourth quarter, because it really does take on a different tone. It doesn't mean necessarily you quit working. You may work in a different way. You may work less. You may work more. You may shift gears and do something completely different. But it means that you see life differently. You have some different priorities in your life. As you and your bride have discovered with grandkids, that changes you some, that changes your perspective. And so really nobody pays much attention to that. So we really kind of began pursuing that. So like you said, we wrote the fable, No Regrets, which is about a woman who's turning 60 and encountering some of these same kinds of questions that begin to arise about that period, and then put together a workbook, which sounds almost identical to your title there. We call it the fourth quarter of your life, Embracing What Matters Most. Cool. So is what you were saying with money and meaning. Yeah. So it's 40 exercises that you don't have to necessarily do them in some certain order, but 40 exercises to help you kind of process and think through where you are, where you've been, what God might have in store for you, dream a little bit about what your fourth quarter could look like. So it's really, this was a project I've been dreading when we started it 5 or 6 years ago, because we've been talking about it forever. I was like, man, I don't want about aging and dying. But as I got into it, it was really energizing, Jeff. I mean, as you tell me, I found it ironically, found it very invigorating.
Oh, that's cool. Well, when you're talking about the way we change the way we think as we get to these later seasons of life,
right?
I experience that all the time with clients as we set goals, and goals are, the goals are good and bad. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're great for giving you a target and giving you something to pursue and get you out of bed every day. And if they're related to your values, they can be really good benchmarks to kind of measure where are you relative to your goals. Again, provided they're consistent with your values. But there's a downside to goals too, because we can become a slave, to goals and not live in the present. But what's relevant to me from what you just said is I find our goals change. Mm-hmm. The things that I thought was going to be important to me, when I forecasted when I was 40 years old, what was going to be important to me when I was 60. Was pretty, and now that I'm 60, things that are important to me are quite different than I thought they would be when I was 40. So there's a lot there. Let's talk about No Regrets for a moment, the fable. And obviously it's researched. So you went and did a lot of research about what people in the quote fourth quarter, I guess, regrets of people in the fourth quarter, or things they wish they had done, I guess. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of these regrets? I mean, what are some of the things that your research uncovered that we regret, that I guess is, and I guess the fable is to encourage us to address these, hopefully sooner than the fourth quarter, but at least to live intentionally. So can you share some of that?
Yeah. So, the amount of research we did is probably a podcast in and of itself.
Oh, I'm sure.
We read almost all the science that we could find. There's an enormous amount of science on aging and geriatrics out there, just to kind of understand that kind of stuff. And then began to study some of the more psychological and sociological studies around people's happiness, around their sense of meaning and purpose and life as they age, and how they see themselves differently. And then around regrets in particular, there's several good studies out there from hospices and from different kinds of settings, to having people kind of talk about that. And then we did some of that on our own as well. Went and sat in some different kinds of settings and just listened and took copious notes. Right. And then obviously having been a pastor for 20 years, I've got a pretty good warehouse of notes and reflections on some of this that I kind of chronicled along the way. Mm-hmm. And so, part of it's around regrets, part of it's around our hopes of having no regrets. And so part of it was focusing on what are some of those regrets, as you mentioned, and what can I do now to help increase the likelihood that I don't have that regret. But secondly, also, what does it look like to live your fourth quarter intentionally? What are the people that we see who are thriving and seem to have the greatest sense of purpose and meaning and joy and energy in that fourth quarter? What are the habits? What are the mindsets? What are the qualities that seem to create that? Is it just is it accidental? Is it based personality based? And so we really try to take all that and put it together. And so we talk about some of these regrets, and you and I can chat about that in a second. And then also so we really distilled it down to here's the 5 keys that we observed in all these people, and tried to kind of map all that out and get it down to something that's digestible for one read, to kind of give you here's sort of a basic blueprint or roadmap to, if you're doing these 5 things, you're probably going to have a pretty good fourth quarter. Obviously, you got to put together the financial planning with people like you. You've got to put together some physical health kinds of stuff as well. But for the purpose, meaning, energy, and joy and direction, these were sort of the 5 keys.
Wow. Okay, there's a lot packed into.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, you wound me up. And I started.
Well, no, I love it. I love it. Can we talk about a couple of that? Well, let's start with a couple of the regrets.
Okay.
I know. So, what are some of the bigger regrets that you think people have reported in this literature, and the evidence that people wish they had done differently, or wish their life didn't turn out? What are some of the key themes on the regrets, do you think?
Yeah, there's we kind of it was some of the content that you saw that I have on my YouTube channel. It was sort of the eight top regrets,
right?
And a couple of those really stood out to me. One was the very practical one of, I wish I'd been a better spouse. I wish I had been a better husband, or I wish I'd been a better wife.
Right.
And that sometimes as we age, we begin to kind of reflect back on how we've handled things in our marriage. And also, I would hear that a lot, which kind of surprised me when somebody would die, and I would be either at the funeral or leading the funeral. I would hear that a lot as well from the surviving spouses. I wish I'd been a better wife to him, or I wish I'd been a better husband to her. And it kind of goes with, you and I are both baby boomers, or close to it.
Right.
And baby boomer divorce rates are spiking. The youngest baby boomers are 59 years old. So you're talking like 59 to 75, 77 year olds. That the divorce rate in that age demographic now is skyrocketing.
Yeah. So great divorce is real.
Yeah, it really is. And it's tragic when you think about it. You've poured your life in that long, and then all of a sudden you go, now what was your name again? And do we really have anything in common? And you can't see a future together. And I think that's where some of those regrets come from. Then the 2 that were particularly powerful for me was, one, I wish I'd pursued more of my dreams. Kind of a sense of either life didn't allow me to, or I played it too safe. I was risk averse, or I got caught up in other kinds of stuff. And so sort of that deep spiritual longing, that there's some stuff I really would have liked to have tried, whether it was professionally or educationally or athletically or what have you. I wish I'd pursued some of that. And it's sort of, I guess, closely related to the one that you'll find surprising, the one that I struggle with the most. I wish I'd really expressed myself more.
Okay.
I think a lot of us we get along to go along to get along. Just like sometimes we're scared of kind of broaching this subject, or this is an awkward conversation or an uncomfortable conversation, and we go, you know what, it's just not worth it. And so we just sort of bury a lot of that, and we get to the end and go, I wish I'd have said some of these things. And some of those are conflict oriented, and frankly, some of them are just intimacy oriented. I really wish I'd told some of the people I love. In that short little video I did on, I wish I'd learned to express myself more. Yeah. Really, the simplest things are saying thank you, I love you, and I'm proud of you, and I'm sorry. Those if you wanted to say those 4 things, you're probably gonna be in pretty good shape.
Yeah, these are kind of interrelated to me in a way. I know I saw a speaker 30 years ago talk about something similar. But he said, related to the dreams, I wish I had pursued my dreams. Oftentimes we don't take enough risk. We don't risk more. We're protecting, but when I think about the relationship challenge that you just mentioned about not expressing ourselves, I think oftentimes that's because we don't risk. We feel
that's a great insight, Jeff.
And so we're unwilling to put ourselves out there. I'm a peacemaker on the Enneagram, so I'm the poster child for avoiding conflict. So, I would have guessed that. I'd have guessed that. So I'm that guy that sometimes does not take relational risk. That's what,
Right.
when you talk about not expressing yourself. So
I'm writing
those
that down.
are,
That's a great observation, man. I'm writing that one down. That's good.
so, well, I had one idea, good idea this year. That's good.
Yeah, that's why you can retire for the
I'll
rest
put
of
the date.
until 2024.
I'm done. I'll put that on the
Yeah.
calendar. Yeah. So, that's cool. One of the ones that stood out to me, because I went through some of these on your material, and is worry. You talk a little bit about worry.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I think for our friends, and that includes you and I guess, in the fourth quarter, oftentimes we're at this point with some measure of worldly success, or at least financial comfort, or reasonable comfort. But we worry all the time about things we can't control, and 24/7 media. And in my case, I'm always talking about the financial journalism, the news, the investment news channels giving you breaking news happens every 30 seconds these days because they're trying to get eyeballs. And so you enumerated worry as one. Did I get that right? Was worry one of the?
Yeah, and I wish I hadn't worried so much about things that never happened.
Oh, okay. We forecast.
Yeah, just all the stuff, and some of that's worrying about whether Joe Biden, Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis is going to be president, whether the Fed's going to raise the rates, worrying about that. But some of it's just that, like you said, I'm worried I'm going to lose everything. I'm worried I'm not going to have enough. I'm worried that I'm going to get sick. I'm worried that da 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 da. And so we create this, and that's part of the challenge of the fourth quarter is you do tend to get a little more conservative, and you do tend to kind of begin to close down in terms. Yeah, you do, and you protect some relationships, and one of the 5 keys that we share is actually to kind of push back against that, and we call that remaining open to life, to explore new things, make new friends, try some new adventures, to get yourself out of that mode. Because if you allow your world to get smaller, it tends to get more worry filled. Rather than worry-free. You think you're doing yourself a favor by simplifying things, but oftentimes you're doing the exact opposite. You have less to focus on, and so then you become more obsessive or worried about that smaller box.
Yeah, and kind of internal focused instead of external focused in some respect. Yeah, in your video, you talked about a couple of antidotes to worry. You mind sharing those?
Remind me, the antidotes to worry. Help me.
Well,
I can't pull my own videos off the top of my head.
That's okay.
I'm getting too old, Jeff. I'm getting too old.
Well, the two things that spoke to me were obviously, you have to believe that there's a power greater than yourself that's controlling the universe. Yep. I mean, your faith can really be helpful in terms of that, because there's so much we can't control. And then the second one was gratitude. Your antidote was gratitude.
Sorry. Yeah, I misheard you, Jeff. I thought you said antidotes, not antidotes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I was trying to think of, no, it's not your fault.
I'm sorry.
My brain went to, I must have told a story and I can't remember what it was, but I'm with you now. Sorry about that. That prayer and gratitude, because we're not too far away from having celebrated Easter, fasting as a third one, just to kind of free yourself from some of that concern. It helps you to free yourself from some of the material attachments you have, but that prayer of understanding that really it all belongs to God.
Yeah.
And then the gratitude of the deep sense of gratitude that there, as you said, I got a lot of blessings in my life. And so I can focus on the one negative thing, or I can focus on the 9 good things. And there's something in our human nature, for most of us, not everybody, but that wants to immediately veer toward that one negative thing and worry about it, and neglect the 9 wonderful blessings that my life is filled with, and to be gratitude. And it really does change your whole disposition.
Yeah. Yeah. So some of these regrets were, again, around, not pursuing my dreams, not being a better, spouse or friend, or not sharing and being more vulnerable. I wish I hadn't worried so much about things that never happened. I mean, there's the whole series that are, that our audience can check out your book and get more insight, as well as some of the keys. Why don't we jump into a few of the keys? Do you mind sharing some of the the 5 keys
Sure.
to living and dying with no regrets?
I can actually do that off the top of my head. I'm proud to say.
I know you can. This is the one thing I remember about our relationship, Alan. You always remembered everybody's name. I don't know if you had like a photographic memory. I didn't know how you did it. So I knew, I assumed you misunderstood me a while ago because you remember everything. I never seen anybody in my life.
I got that from my dad. I was really lucky because my dad is just, if you met somebody, he would remember their name. And I just inherited that. One of my daughters will never remember your name, and one of my daughters got that same old gene. So I got one with a great memory, and the other one was like, "Yeah, I know you, but I can't remember your name."
Yeah, what a great skill to have. So let's talk a little bit about the 5 keys.
Yeah, so I'll just kind of walk you through them fairly quickly, kind of bullet point wise. But number one, and we put them in an order for a reason. The first one is to say yes to God.
Let me back up a moment. So these are the 5 keys to living and dying with no regrets.
Correct. So number one is to say yes to God, because as we observed people that had a deep, what we could call it, a robust faith life. And I mean, there's so much science to back this up. And this is, I mean, even though my faith is important to me and yours is to you, this is not a faith statement. I mean, you can back this up with so much science. The people that have a robust faith life in the fourth quarter have a much more fulfilling, much more positive, much more joyful experience than those who don't, for all kinds of reasons. But it gives them a purpose. They know where they're going. They know what they're kind of preparing for, and they have a sense that there's somebody else alongside them on the journey. Right. Number two, and this is the one that was to me was the most, I don't want to say revolutionary, but the most provocative, is to pursue a fourth quarter virtue or a fourth quarter soul trait. If you think about, say, the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. If you're Catholic, you think about Catholic virtues. You think about faith, hope, love, and you think about patience and humility and those kinds of things. Right. The people that we saw that seemed to have a real energy and a focus to their fourth quarter, they weren't just sort of meandering or floundering, really had a sense, and for some of them it was very conscious, and for some of them it was just sort of subconscious. And as we pointed out to them, they went, "Yeah, you're right." There's that there was one of those qualities really was sort of the one that they felt like, in my fourth quarter life, God's really blossoming or flowering that in me. It might be something that I really haven't paid attention to up until now. It might be something that I've done all along, and now I'm doing it in a whole different way. But there was a sense of, I'm really pursuing to be a more loving person than I ever have, or I'm pursuing joy in my life in a way or I'm learning how to be patient, or I'm learning about wisdom. And we have some different stories in the fable in particular, No Regrets, that illustrate 5 or 6 different people who had very different senses of what that virtue or what that fruit is. But really, that was what was the driving force of their fourth quarter, and it made all the difference.
Interesting.
Number 3 is to give it away. And I think the average American hears that and they immediately leap to money and meaning. And obviously financial generosity is a big part of that. But really, the people who seem to have the most energized and joyful fourth quarters tended to be going through not with their hands clenched, clinging onto stuff, but with their hands open. And not only giving away of their possessions, which is a huge part of the fourth quarter, but really giving their friendship away, giving themselves away, giving their love away, giving their time away. A position of generosity, right, was just central to their fourth quarter. Number 4 was to forgive often. And the image that I use there is, you don't want to be going into the fourth quarter of your life pushing this big wheelbarrow full of all these old regrets and grudges and wounds and injuries and resentments, because it's just going to weigh you down, and it's going to destroy any kind of sense of hope or of purpose in your fourth quarter. And so to learn to be forgiving, and again, it kind of goes with what you were saying a minute ago when I was drawing the blank on what you said. The antidote to worry oftentimes is, or really, I guess really we were talking more about learning to express yourself, that being able to say, "I forgive you," or being able to say, "Please forgive me." Yeah. And letting go of a lot of that stuff that gives you a real liberation for the fourth quarter. Wow. And then the 5th one is the one we mentioned a minute ago: remain open to life. And that is to kind of resist the urge that we so often saw among people who actually became increasingly miserable, as they got smaller and smaller and smaller and did fewer things, tried fewer new things, met fewer people. And so to try to force yourself, if it's not your natural disposition, to try some new things doesn't mean you have to try to climb Mount Everest, but try some new things, try some new foods, make some new friends, do some different things to keep yourself exploring and open. And those people were much, much, much more happy and joy filled in the fourth quarter than those who didn't.
Oh, there's a lot of wisdom just in those 5 points, and I'm sure you probably do a podcast on each one of them. You could talk for a long time about each one. On the one on the virtues, so the idea there is find a virtue like contentment, as an example, or generosity, or love, and the people that were one of the 5 keys was obviously exploring and developing the virtue. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, pursuing that, what we call pursuing that fourth quarter virtue. And gotcha. I'll give you just a couple of quick examples without giving the whole story. But in the fable, there's a woman. We'll start with a guy who was a hospital administrator who his wife developed Alzheimer's, and he, in retiring from his work to care for her full time, really developed this patience that he never really had in his life. And he said, began to see that patience spill out into all the other parts of my life. When I would be in a doctor's waiting room, which people who are 75 and 80 years old spend a lot of time there. When I was in traffic, when I was in the grocery, the patience, because God had been growing this in me, when I recognized that, it really began to bear fruit in every aspect of my life.
Right.
Another woman who was out, I think she was out in California, and she what was she? She was a nurse, and she retired, and she was single, single, and really gave herself over to the virtue of faith, and really almost became in her 60s and 70s, became this missionary, and would make these trips back and forth to Cameroon, I think was the country that she would go to in Africa, and develop these relationships, and would take people with her, and actually died in Cameroon in a car accident. I don't remember how many trips she made, but that faith gave that emphasis on growing her faith and giving her faith away, that generosity of her faith, really gave her fourth quarter a whole purpose. And then we've got an example of a guy who was a think tank leader and a great writer, and he realized as he hit his late 40s and into his 50s that he wasn't as sharp as he had used to be, and so he kind of moved out of being the head of the think tank, had the young guns take over, and became more of a coach and a mentor to share. He said, you get accumulated wisdom at that point. You're not the quick information processor anymore. Right. You're now one who's accrued wisdom over a long period of time. And so to share that wisdom in mentoring and coaching. So wisdom kind of became the virtue for his fourth quarter. So that's 3 or 4 examples there.
Gotcha.
And then the main woman in the fable really tries to develop joy.
Gotcha. Yeah, that was helpful, because that was the one that seemed, I've been involved in a sort of training recently on how to be a better advisor with, emotional and behavioral coaching. Not a therapist. We're not trained therapists, but at least have deeper conversations to help kind of tee clients up with questions to ask themselves to develop. And, all of this that you've described in these 5 keys is so consistent with the happiness literature. I mean, it's not, this, I don't think there's anything controversial about this.
Sure.
And it's really consistent with some of the secular, happiness literature in terms of what gives life meaning and purpose. And so this is really cool. And I love the way that you've taken the tact on sharing the message between the fable and then you give the workbook. So let me make sure I understand this. So the second book is really a book with exercises to do your own work on some of these, how to develop some of these keys. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, right. The fourth quarter of your life, embracing what matters most, as you were saying, helping people, giving them 40 exercises to begin to look back on their lives, to look at the present of their lives, and to dream about the future, to really figure out what does matter most for me. And so then when they go meet with you, they can say, I've kind of processed through, here's what's really going to matter. It's not just, my fourth quarter is not just about the financial well-being. The financial well-being is a part of that. And so as my financial advisor, Jeff, here's kind of what I want my life. Here's what's going to be a priority. And so let's balance in my finances with that. So it's 40 exercises. Some are very simple. Some are a little longer and more complex, but 40 exercises to help people do that.
Gotcha. Well, that's terrific. Well, this has been terrific, Alan. I know we could go a really long time on some of this, but this is a really helpful. I know our audience will find it very useful. I know I did. Any final comments you'd like to share? And while you do that, let us know how we can find you. How can our audience find Alan Hunt and your resources? Well,
as you said at the beginning, I am the fourth quarter guy, so it's fourthquarterguy.com. Spelled out FOURTH, fourthquarterguy.com. And really, it's interesting. My closing thought, Jeff, is I kind of see you as a thought leader and as a guy who's taking the conventional, traditional role of the financial planner and the wealth management and broadening it out to help people really think about their lives. And I never really thought about that before until we published these two books. And I started getting calls. I've gotten, 6-8 calls in the last month or two from different people like you across the country. This helps me begin to help my clients really think about their lives, not just think about their money. And so I applaud you for exactly what you're doing, helping people really dream about their fourth quarter and then letting their money help be a part of that rather than being the focus of that, because I think it makes all the difference in the world.
Great. So one more time, it's the fourthquarterguy.com.
That is correct.
Okay. So check Alan out. You can see all his books and resources there. I'm sure his books are also available on Amazon and all the major online retailers if you want to find him there as well. So thank you again, Alan. I really enjoyed this, and I'm sure our audience did. And thank you all for joining us today. If you'd like to learn more about Alan's material, please check him out. If you'd like to reach out to me, I can be reached at moneyandmeaning@tandemgrowth.com. And please check out past podcasts at Spotify and iTunes and wherever you get your normal normal podcast listening, and give us a rating. And remember to find what makes your heart come alive and go put the plans in place to pursue it. Thanks, and have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the Money and Meaning Show with Jeff Bernier, a show dedicated to help you gain the confidence and freedom to lead a life of personal significance and help you get your actions and resources in alignment with what matters most. We would love to hear from you. If you have any questions for Jeff or comments on the show, feel free to reach out to us at moneyandmeaning@tandemgrowth.com. Or you can find us on the web at www.tandemgrowth.com. Jeff Bernier is the President and Chief Investment Officer at TandemGrowth Financial Advisors, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. This show is a production of TandemGrowth Financial Advisors, LLC. All information discussed is general in nature, is provided for informational purposes only, and should not be construed as specific financial, legal, or tax advice. Listeners should consult an attorney or tax professional regarding their specific legal or tax situation. Listeners should not rely on the content of this podcast as the basis for any investment decisions. A professional advisor should be consulted, and/or independent due diligence should be conducted before implementing anything discussed in this show. While information presented is believed to be factual and up to date, TandemGrowth Financial Advisors, LLC, does not guarantee its accuracy, and it should not be regarded as a complete analysis of the subjects discussed. TandemGrowth Financial Advisors, LLC, does not make any representations or warranties as to the accuracy, timeliness, suitability, completeness, or relevance of any information prepared by any unaffiliated third party, such as guests on the podcast, and takes no responsibility for the same.